Just 1 million. As of this morning, more than 50,000 Americans have now died in the COVID-19 outbreak. At its current rate, the next few days could see the number of American fatalities surpass the death toll during the Vietnam War, a war that lasted roughly 20 years, from 1955 to the fall of Saigon in 1975. The man who avoided service in that war due to bone spurs does not want you to remember this prediction that he made just 59 days ago.
And again, when you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done.
But as alarming as the escalating death toll is, a death toll that far exceeds every other country in the world. Around this country, governors are grappling with decisions about when to reopen businesses to revive the struggling economy. Well, governors, if you're listening, here are a few startling facts. In Wisconsin, the number of cases spiked on Thursday, just over 2 weeks after the Republican-controlled legislature refused to delay the primary election that included a hotly contested state Supreme Court seat, forcing hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites to vote in person. In Florida, where Governor DeSantis reopened a few beaches, the number of new cases also rose Thursday after a 5-day period of decline. And in Michigan, there's been a rise in confirmed cases for the past 4 days as well, just a short time after protesters gathered in public to demand an end to that state's lockdown orders. These statistics make it all the more confusing that Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia would proceed with his plan to reopen his state yesterday. Phase 1 of that process began with places like hair salons, nail salons, and even gyms, bowling alleys, and tattoo parlors back up and running. As on Monday, other close contact businesses like restaurants and movie theaters will follow suit. Here's what Governor Kemp had to say about that earlier this week.
By taking this measured action, we will get Georgians back to work safely without undermining the progress that we all have made in this battle against COVID-19. Now, I will say that, when we have more people moving around, we're probably going to see our cases continue to go up. But we're a lot better prepared for that now than we were over a month ago. I can tell you, I don't give a damn about politics right now.
He seemed to be taking advice from the man that he treats as his boss, Donald Trump, who for weeks has been hell-bent on reopening the economy to try and salvage his own re-election prospects. In the past, he's even encouraged his supporters to defy lockdown orders that he deemed as too strict in a pandemic. Here's what he had to say about Governor Kemp's decision as recently as Tuesday.
How do you protect the people of South Carolina, for example, from a potentially bad decision by a governor in Georgia?
So he's a very capable man. He knows what he's doing. He's done a very good job as governor, Georgia.
But perhaps, given the rising infections in states where citizens did not heed stay-at-home orders, or maybe just because he's Donald Trump, and he just repeats the last thing that he hears, here he is just 1 day later on Wednesday.
I told the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, that I disagree strongly with his decision to open certain facilities which are in violation of the Phase 1 guidelines.
Joining me now is the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, Keisha Lance Bottoms. And Mayor, Madam Mayor, thank you so much for being here. And I want to start just by reading you a little bit of a piece in The Guardian this week that is titled, "Georgia's COVID-19 Reopening Pits White Governor Against Black Mayors." Here's a bit of it. Georgia is a state where African Americans make up more than 32% of the population, but account for an estimated 54% of known coronavirus deaths. Only 20% of black workers reported being eligible to work from home, compared with about 30% of their white counterparts, according to the Economic Policy Institute. It feels like this governor is not all that concerned about those people who are at risk. And what do you make of this idea of reopening close contact businesses like hair salons and tattoo parlors and movie theaters?
So good morning, Joy, and thank you for having me. Just something that struck me even as I was watching your introduction was the distance that the governor had between the person holding the sign and the person who was doing the sign language. That's a safe distance that we are to stay away from each other. You can't do that when you are cutting someone's hair or when you are giving them a massage or a manicure. And so I think therein lies the problem with lifting these restrictions. And what we know in looking at the numbers, African Americans are disproportionately impacted by this disease. I've had a good working relationship with our governor. So this transcends race, it transcends economic level. This is a virus that's hitting us all. But and despite the great working relationship I've had with him over the past couple of years, I think that this is a bad decision. I think that it is putting all of us at risk, but especially communities of color, where you have a beauty and barber shop on every single corner. It's not just about the people in that shop. You will infect and impact a community as a whole, and that is what concerns me.
Yeah, and, there's this disconnect between, what business owners are dealing with, which is obviously a marked loss of revenue. That is obviously very difficult to deal with. They have to also pay rent. They also have payroll, et cetera, and stressors. Between that and the science and the data. So let me play for you first. This is a barbershop owner actually in your city, in Atlanta, saying they want to come back. They want to reopen. Here, take a listen.
The South is a lot different from up north. New York has been hit hard. All them places been hit so hard. We haven't been hit hard like that. We got empty beds in hospitals now. And if we do our job, where the Secretary of State and the governor has put the rules and regulations in force, I think it's better now than it's ever been. I mean, we clean up after every chair. Every customer gets out of the chair. We wearing gloves. Hey, our customers are in better shape now coming in than they've ever been in our country.
And that, of course, that is not a black barbershop. So we don't really know how barbershops in the black community are going to react differently, if they are going to react differently from from majority barbershops. But the data shows that Georgia has one of the lowest testing rates in the entire country. Fewer than 1% of Georgians have been tested for coronavirus. And there's also a lot of data that suggests, and this is from the New York Times, that the infection rate in Georgia is getting worse, not better. It's actually going up. So how do you manage the disconnect when you have this very Trumpian governor who wants to reopen for his own reasons, and you've now got the data showing things are getting worse in your state?
I actually know that owner of that barbershop. It's a barbershop in Buckhead. I stuck my head in there a few weeks ago before everything was shut down. It's a very diverse barbershop and really representative of who we are as a community. But again, this is something we will agree to disagree on. What concerns me when I look at our numbers that I received at 7 o'clock last night, with nearly 23,000 people in this state testing positive, and remembering we still aren't testing people with mild symptoms and people who are asymptomatic, that was up 26% from 7 days ago. Our deaths, 899 as of last night, up 32.79% from a week ago. 231 deaths in the last week, more than a quarter of all the COVID-19 deaths that we've had in this state. Wishing the economy to reopen will not make this virus go away. The reason that we do have beds open in our city is because we have been very aggressive in shutting things down. And I've said this the past couple of days, Joy, simply because we have capacity doesn't mean that we should work to fill those beds up. We cannot sacrifice people's lives and enter into this public health experiment for the sake of the economy.
Well, can I ask you very quickly before I let you go? I've had a lot of friends from Georgia texting me, asking, and I want to ask you, is it possible that your governor wants to reopen your state because the budget in the state is not in a good shape, not in a good place because of deep tax cuts and past economic policies, and that this is a way, reopening, to push people out of eligibility to collect unemployment? Because technically, if you reopen the state, these people are no longer unemployed and they can't claim benefits.
Joy, I think that is a very good question. What we know is that our state budget is facing a $4 billion shortfall over the next several years. We also know that one question on the unemployment application is, are you eligible to work? Did you refuse to work? And that's a consideration that people are giving. But I'm hearing people say, if I had money in my pocket, I would stay at home. It's the reason we launched the Small Business Fund in Atlanta. It's the reason we have a beauty and barbershop relief fund to try and give people that option. But that is certainly a consideration. And I know that he has publicly expressed he is concerned about the state of the economy in Georgia. But again, I don't think it should be at the risk of people's lives.
Very quickly, before I let you go, we know that a fellow Georgian, Stacey Abrams, has been mentioned as a potential shortlister for vice president as Joe Biden is making his selection. Madam Mayor, are you being vetted? Because your name has also popped up as somebody who may be being vetted for the vice presidential running mate.
Joy, I've seen and read the same stories that you have. I've seen my name mentioned, but obviously being the mayor of a major city in the middle of a pandemic is more than enough. And I had to think about it in addition to trying to figure out third grade math again. So what I've said continuously is that I want the vice president to put on that ticket whomever gives him the best chance of beating Donald Trump in November.
Do you think that that needs to be a black woman? Because that's another thing that's being talked about a lot.
You know, I think that the vice president will give whatever consideration needs to be given to this ticket. He's been through this before. He knows this process way better than any of us know. So I won't second guess what he feels is needed to round out his ticket, but I do trust that he will make the best decision.
Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, stay safe. Good luck with the third grade math. And also, we're all thinking about your city. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you this morning.
Thank you, Joy.
And thank you very much. And joining the discussion now is Jonathan Capehart, MSNBC contributor and opinion columnist for the Washington Post, and Maya Wiley, legal analyst for MSNBC and professor at the New School. And Maya, I'm going to go to you first because you worked for a time in city government. The considerations that the governor is making are supposed to mainly include the health and keeping his constituents alive, his members of his state alive. But I have heard a lot of talk from Georgia, and the mayor did not dispute it, that some of these considerations are strictly financial, that because the state cannot afford necessarily to pay out unemployment benefits because they've tanked their own budget with tax cuts, that the governor is trying to keep folks off the rolls. He's trying to make it so that they can't apply. What do you make of that theory?
Well, I can't speak for what is motivating the governor of Georgia. I think that there's no question that states and cities across this country are feeling an enormous amount of economic pain, and we're even seeing a growth in hunger as people lose meals. I think the disturbing thing about this is the only reason you would reopen the economy is because of politics. And I say that because the reality is you have so many people clamoring for finding a way, just as Mayor Bottoms said, finding a way to make their lives work. When government doesn't step in with really good unemployment benefits, when it doesn't step in with the health care that people need, if it doesn't step in with making sure people have paid sick leave, all the things that enable them to do exactly what they want to do, which is stay safe, stay home. It's not that people don't want to, it's that they feel an enormous amount of pressure about getting back to the ability to support their families. So really what Governor Kemp should be doing is what we see a lot of governors across the country doing, is asking why states aren't getting more support from the federal government in order to meet the very life needs, necessities of our residents. And that's something that I think is a very legitimate question for Governor Kemp, because this isn't black and white. This is life and death.
But, Jonathan, it's ideological, right? So you have these red state governors who, in theory, don't believe in federal funding of anything. They also don't believe in taxes, so they have a very low tax base. So there's not a lot of money coming in. And a lot of these states, quite frankly, are on the dole. They take in more money from the federal government than they give out. There are only, I believe, 2 red states or maybe 3 that give more money to the federal government than they take back, and Georgia ain't one of them.
Well, and to put a finer point on it, it's money from blue states going in terms of tax revenue to the federal government that then gets doled out to the red states. So, and I think Governor Cuomo made that point a couple of days ago. The other thing here is the focus on reopening the economy is based in politics. I agree with Maya on that point. But as she was responding, I was thinking, imagine where we would be if we didn't have a president of the United States whose sole focus was how the Dow Industrial Average was doing, how Wall Street was doing, how the stock market was doing, how for the last couple of weeks have been talking about opening up the economy instead of putting his focus on, or at least trying to strike a balance between the public health and the economy. You know, I interviewed Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan on Thursday, and she was under immense pressure with those demonstrations in Lansing from people saying reopen the economy. And yesterday she announced that she's looking into maybe easing the restrictions, but she said her stay-at-home order was being pushed into May. For her, she told me that a national strategy on testing and on PPE would be something that would save lives, but would also give her and actually all the other governors the room to be able to balance public health with the economy. And from her perspective, and I think from all the other governors' perspectives, perhaps with the exception of maybe Governor Kemp, her overriding concern is a second wave of infections. And I think that is what Governor Kemp is risking by doing what he's doing. You showed those maps that were in the New York Times 2 days before he reopened the economy yesterday. The number of infections were the biggest they've been in, compared to the other 2 maps that were shown on that page in the New York Times that you showed earlier there, that we're looking at right now. Yeah. Imagine if we had a president who was able to balance public health and the economic well-being of the nation in those states.
Well, or imagine if you had a different governor. I want to very quickly play Stacey Abrams, who a lot of people believe should have been governor based on, a lot of tricks being played with the voter rolls, and she wasn't. Here she was on Morning Joe this week talking about the disparities in Georgia.
We're the 8th largest state in the nation, but we have the 14th highest infection rate and the 7th slowest testing rate. What that means is that these jobs that are reopening, these businesses that are reopening, are going to force frontline workers back to the work without having been tested, without having access to a healthcare system to help them if they are in need.
Maya, this is not a small state. If a huge outbreak on the level that we're seeing in places like New York does kick in Georgia, this is going to be devastation and a lot of lives lost disproportionately in the Black community.
Absolutely. And the Latino community, I just want to say that here in New York City, we lost a 5-month-old baby, Jay Natalie, who was the daughter of a firefighter and a mom who worked for our Department of Education. 5 months old. Don't tell me that this is just about people over 80 in nursing homes. It is not. The youngest person we know to have died of complications from coronavirus. This is not a game. And the more we're seeing and learning, I mean, Stacey Abrams is exactly right. And we're an epicenter here in New York, and it is now spreading in rural areas around the country. And we're seeing in places like South Korea, where they were extremely competent at getting coronavirus under control, that they've seen and been able to track down this call center in South Korea where you had 50% of the workers getting sick on the 11th floor of one building. Now, take that to other states that are reopening businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jonathan, Rick Wilson, I think, said it best, that the governors that think they're being obedient to Donald Trump by saying, oh, yes, sir, we'll reopen our businesses and put our own citizens at risk for you, sir, to help your reelection, they quickly find out that his loyalty to them doesn't exist. It's only one way, because he then turns on them and goes, well, that's a terrible idea.
Right. And we saw that in high relief this week, where you showed one day the president says, I trust Brian Kemp, he's a smart guy. And then the very next day, he trashes him, not only saying that he thought that the governor was making a bad decision, but made a point of saying his name over and over and over again as if he is punishing him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's not going to be loyal back to y'all. So I don't know why you're putting him in front of your own constituents. Jonathan Capehart, Maya Wiley, you guys are great. Thank you very much. Stay safe, both of you. And your bookshelf game are both perfection. Coming up, Donald Trump thinks that he could make his disinfectant inhalation device ideas disappear with no streaks or residue.
Moderate to severe.
Get to know his face in every single place. When you see it, you'll know quick. Things marked yuck make you sick. Sick, sick, sick. Sick, sick, sick. Mr. Yuck is me. Mr. Yuck is green.
That was a PSA created by the Pittsburgh Poison Center in the 1970s to educate kids about the dangers of drinking household cleaners like bleach and ammonia. Now, certainly kids need help knowing the difference between harmless items and hazardous ones. But adults know better, right? Well, apparently not if you're Donald Trump. This week, in one of the most bizarre moments to ever occur on live television, particularly involving the President of the United States, he offered up a possible new treatment against COVID-19, injecting disinfectant into the bodies of infected people. Yes, disinfectant, the stuff that you use to clean and kill bacteria on household surfaces like countertops and doorknobs, like Lysol or bleach. And because this epic moment from the White House briefing room went viral, the maker of Lysol was forced to put out a strongly worded statement. Quote, "As a global leader in health and hygiene products, we must be clear that under no circumstance should our disinfectant products be administered into the human body through injection, ingestion, or any other route." And after a full day's news cycle filled with equal parts ridicule and alarm, as state health agencies like the one in Maryland received 100 calls inquiring about the new Trump miracle cure, the White House walked back the whole thing and, staying right on brand, blamed the media for its accurate reporting. Donald Trump, meanwhile, before a record-short version of his daily reality show, tried to claim, he was just being sarcastic when he suggested his followers down disinfectants and blast their bodies with UV light. But take a listen to what he said. Take a listen to what he actually said, and tell me if this sounds like he's joking. And while you're watching, pay very close attention to the reaction from Dr. Deborah Birx.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
Joining me now, Dr. Irwin Redlener, MSNBC public health analyst and director of Columbia University's National Center for Disaster Preparedness, and Dr. Tamara Moise, an ER physician and co-founder of Big Apple Urgent Care. I want to play one more clip from this because it was extraordinary live television. Unfortunately, it was live. Here is Donald Trump a little bit more on his new miracle drug ideas.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light. And I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting.
Get the right folks who could.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with, but it sounds interesting to me.
Dr. Redlener, he was not joking. He was speaking with William Bryan, who's the Undersecretary for Science and Technology at the Department of Homeland Security. He wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to, make the, ridicule the press. He was serious. What danger does that do, that kind of communication from the President of the United States do to the public health?
Good morning, Joy. So this was a display of extraordinary ignorance and arrogance that should never have come out of the mouth of the President of the United States. He was clearly not joking. Not only did he look at Bill Bryan from Homeland Security, he also was looking at Dr. Debbie Birx, who I thought was just going to fall off her chair from disbelief. I can't even imagine what was going through her mind. But nonetheless, there we are, a president being extraordinarily inappropriate and dangerous. Actually, anybody now who ends up having ill effects from following any part of what the president was recommending is now on his shoulders. A lot of things now that he's going to be responsible for in terms of the failures of his administration to act appropriately in face of this this pandemic, really. But adding this to it is a surreal, bizarre, and ignorant display of whatever it is that's going through Donald Trump's really distorted mind right now about what to do about the pandemic. But I think it's worth repeating again that these are dangerous recommendations that the president made, and people should stay away from them.
Absolutely. He has no qualifications to say this whatsoever. And the problem is, Dr. Moise, folks like you who are an ER doctor end up dealing with the consequences of Donald Trump, who has a cult of personality, meaning anything he says is taken in as the God's honest truth, literally God's honest truth, by his supporters. Here is a caller to a conservative radio show. This was just on Friday. This was yesterday. Take a listen.
Maybe they could make some sort of vape that was healthy for you, that would atomize the chemicals into your lungs and could blow it out your nose, But thinking outside the box is what we have to do now, and no one seems to want to do it. They just, I don't know if I'm crazy, but
no, you're not. No, Zach, you're not crazy. And bingo, you said the word, you said the phrase, and thank you for that call. Thinking outside the box. That's literally what the president was doing yesterday. And that's what a good chief executive does.
No, you're not crazy. I think a lot of people would beg to differ. We have reports last month. A man died after taking chloroquine in an attempt to prevent coronavirus. The man and his wife thought the ingredient used to treat sick fish could prevent the disease. The man's wife ended up in an ICU. There was an interview with our own Vaughn Hilliard in which she said, Trump kept saying it was basically pretty much a cure. What would be your message to the American public? She said, is what Vaughn asked, oh, my God, don't take anything. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything that the president says and his people. Call your doctor. But before she got to that point, she ended up in an ICU where then she is now a risk to other people. Your thoughts, Dr. Moise?
I think that at this point, a lot of people are laughing at this whole situation. There are memes out on social media. What we have to realize here is that President Trump has a base. The base listens very intently to what he says and takes his messages very seriously. So now we're seeing that he's putting these inappropriate, dangerous messages out, and people are actually internalizing this and taking them seriously. You have, now you have situations where people in Maryland were, calling the hotline for coronavirus and actually asking about these supposed treatments that he spoke about. So, I don't think people realize the level of danger. I think a lot of people that see this will make sense of this and say, hey, of course, ingesting a disinfectant is not appropriate. But you have people out there that truly listen intently to the president and will follow what he says. And unfortunately, these, the fact that they're actually listening can be extremely dangerous to them. They could die from ingesting these disinfectants. This is not a joke. So the president has to be responsible, and the media outlets that are encouraging his message, you have to be responsible about what you're saying. These are not messages that are backed up by the medical community, and it's an extremely dangerous thing. And with hydroxychloroquine also, the president had come out and said that this might have been a game changer. This is so dangerous. Yes, this is a drug that has gone through some studies now, and the studies are inconclusive at this point. I work, at my urgent care in Brooklyn, New York. I've decided not to use hydroxychloroquine at this time simply because the studies have not proven it to be the drug of choice. It may or may not be. The studies are inconclusive. So at this point, I work in a Black and brown community. I'm going to make sure I'm giving them the highest level of care, and I'm not going to listen to someone like the president, who is not a medical professional. I'm going to make sure that what I'm doing is evidence-based. I have to make sure that my community that they're getting the proper treatment, that they're getting high-quality treatment. So this whole message that the president put out is extremely irresponsible, and it's very dangerous.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Dr. Redlener, he disagrees openly with Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci says we need more tests. He says, I don't agree. He's pushing this. He pushed this hydroxychloroquine, which now the FDA, which reports to him, has cautioned against using outside of a hospital setting due to the risk of heart rhythm problems. So it could be that it's causing more harm than good. At this point, for his supporters, they do know who to listen to between Fauci and Trump. They listen to him.
Yeah, Joy, it's pretty amazing. But I do think you use the term cultish following. It is truly like a cult, and it reminds me of Jim Jones and the Kool-Aid and all that horrible stuff that we saw, 30 years ago, with people just following, quote, the leader, no matter what the leader says and no matter what the leader intends to do or where to take them. And Donald Trump has a cult, and unfortunately, I think that the people that are in his cult, that are immovable from following him, are going to be in significant harm if they follow this advice, not to mention the hydroxychloroquine, which has actually caused some deaths in people, it's thought. So we have a lot to work on here.
And last question to you, Dr. Moise. 1 in 5 New Yorkers may have COVID-19 per antibody test. This is getting terrifying, really, for a lot of folks.
It is. At this point, Governor Cuomo is really ramping up the testing so that we can really confirm that data. So this is the very beginning of the data, but definitely it's very concerning. But I'm not surprised. I'm here on the boots in New York. A lot of people have coronavirus. I had it myself, and I'm over it. Yeah. So I'm honestly not shocked with the statistics, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. Well, stay safe, and we're glad that you are feeling better. Dr. Erwin Redlener, Dr. Tamara Moise, thank you both very much. Stay safe. And coming up, the new coronavirus relief package. Taxpayers paid into federal tax rolls to fund the hospitals and to purchase protective equipment for doctors, nurses, police, and paramedics. Here's what New York Governor Andrew Cuomo had to say about that idea.
Senator Mitch McConnell goes out and he says maybe the states should declare bankruptcy. Okay? This is one of the really dumb ideas of all time. New York puts in more money to the federal pot than it takes out. His state takes out more than it puts in. Senator McConnell, who's getting bailed out here?
On Thursday, the House passed another round of coronavirus relief without that crucial funding for state and local governments. The CARES Act does replenish the Paycheck Protection Program intended for small businesses, and it allocates billions for hospitals and testing, but it's what's not in it that is the challenge. And joining me now is Bishop William Barber, co-chairman of the Poor People's Campaign and author of Revive Us Again, and Seth Harris, former acting Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. And Bishop Barber, just to put a finer point on what the governor said, Governor Cuomo said, he tweeted out these numbers. New York State puts $116 billion more into the federal pot than we take out. Kentucky, Mitch McConnell's state, takes $148 billion more from the federal pot than they put in. But we don't deserve help now because the 15,000 people who died here were predominantly Democrats, he asks. And here is a map that shows the states that are the most dependent upon the federal government. And this is from U.S. News and World Report. Notice that those states are heavily in the West, very Republican states, and in the South. And we've talked about this before, Bishop Barber, the fact that these states don't want to tax, they don't want to pay for education, they don't want to pay for Medicaid, so they don't like to tax rich people, and so now they wind up in trouble, but New York is the one that McConnell wants to punish. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, Joe, that's exactly why on June 20th, 2020, we are having a mass Poor People's Assembly Moral March on Washington to deal with this very question of poverty in the midst of the pandemic. And many of these states who are high poverty states as well and lack of health care states as well. But I have a little bit of a problem with both of the arguments because they argue who has the more right to the federal pot. But there's a framework, Joy, that's primarily focused on an economic strategy about protecting wealth. And what we have to do with all of this is change the starting point. The starting point of our discussions ought to be, how do we impact the 140 million poor and low wealth people? How do we lift from the bottom, since that's where pandemic spread? In Kentucky, 49% of the people are poor and low income. 270,000 people are uninsured. In New York, 51% of the people are poor and low income. 9 million residents, 1 million are uninsured, 89,000 homeless. 3 million workers that make less than $15 an hour. In Kentucky, 872,000 workers that make under $15 an hour, 50% of the workforce. We need an argument, a focus around how we use federal dollars to focus on policies that when they begin, they don't begin from the top, go to the middle and stop, but they begin from the bottom and lift everybody up, because pandemics spread through the inequalities and the fissures in our society. Until we have that focus, going to be in problem as a country. We're going to have major problems as a country.
And you know, Cuomo, a lot of people have been very critical of his attitudes toward Medicaid from time to time. But Seth Harris, the bill that's been passed, I want to move to the bill and talk about it, because what's in it is $320 billion in this Paycheck Protection Program, which goes to small businesses. Hospitals and healthcare workers get $75 billion. Then you see $60 billion for economic injury, disaster loans, and COVID-19 testing only gets $25 billion, which doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot. Things that are not in the bill, though: hazard pay for frontline workers, states and cities getting more money, election security money, more oversight on the bailout, food stamp money, rent freeze money, more checks for stimulus, meaning individuals getting some money. One particular New Yorker who did not vote for it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let me let you listen to how she explained why she did not vote for the bill.
This small bill, while something may be better than nothing, it is happening in the context of Congress having gone on recess for a month. We are going to pass a small potatoes bill, and then we are talking about recessing again until May 4th. Every time we pass one of these bills, we're hearing that the real solution is coming in the next bill, and then the next bill, and the next bill. And at some point, we have to raise our hands and say, when is the solution coming?
You know, Seth Harris, I feel like a lot of people don't understand why there was enough money that Ruth Chris actually gave back their $20 million. These big firms got tons of money, but the Congress can't seem to find a way to get regular people money and first responders money and money for testing.
I agree with you, Joy. I would have voted for the bill because something is better than nothing, and there are millions of small businesses that are at grave risk of disappearing, and we would lose a lot of workers' jobs if we were to allow that to happen. But you're right, there's a lot of things that were missing from this bill that were desperately needed. Money for state and local governments. We need to fund health insurance for workers who've lost their health insurance because of unemployment by funding and subsidizing the COBRA payments that workers would have to make in order to keep their employer-provided health insurance. We need to provide funding for personal protective equipment. I'm inclined to agree with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez that we need to put a moratorium on rent payments, other bill payments, utility payments. We don't need anybody being evicted or foreclosed upon or, losing vital services like internet or lights or water simply because the government has asked them to not go to work and they're not able to earn a living. So I think doing something is better than nothing, but they certainly didn't do enough. I expect that Speaker Pelosi is going to come back with a much more expansive bill that'll include some of the items that you listed, but it's going to be a big fight. Senator McConnell is running for re-election. He's doing very poorly. He's disliked in his state, and so he says inflammatory, patently stupid things like the assault on states that you quoted at the beginning of this segment. And it's just politics. It's the kind of grotesque politics that he's become the symbol of.
Yeah. And Bishop Barber, what do you want to see Democrats push for if there is yet another bill?
Yeah, that's part of the problem. See, the issue, somebody says, well, I would have voted for it. I disagree a little bit with my friend. The problem is, what have we fought for? And we have to start before the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, Republicans racialized poverty. Democrats ran from poverty. When Democrats had majority, we did not vote on certain things that should have taken place. The issue is, what should we be fighting for? And if we are saying that people are heroes and they're frontline workers, we used to call them service workers 45 days ago. Now we call them essential workers. They have not been provided guaranteed health care. We found $3 trillion for corporations. We can't find the money for them to be guaranteed health care. It's in our bloated defense budget. It's in the wealthy paying their fair share. Billionaires have actually made money during this pandemic, and the poor have gotten worse. We are choosing these long lines. We are choosing people not having money during this period of time. Germany said they would pick up the salary of their people during this pandemic. Where's the permanent sick leave? Where is the salary protection? Where's the rent forgiveness? Where's the guarantee of that utilities can't be shut off? Where is the money for undocumented workers and the homeless? Where is the direct money for those communities, people of color, that are being hurt the most, and poor communities like up in Appalachia and Kentucky? Joy, we are making a fundamental mistake, because the scientists tell us, the data tells us, that pandemic spread through the fissures of this society. And these type bills are a dereliction of duty. It says that too many people are still too comfortable with too many other people's deaths. And that is a psychosis that is a part of the American reality. We have to admit that. It's what caused the genocide of natives. It's what caused slavery and lynching and lies about Vietnam. When people in power keep saying the next bill, the next bill, the next bill, or no bill, and we don't fight for it. And people in power are too comfortable with other people's death. And it's time to stop this foolishness and do right from the bottom up if we're going to deal with this pandemic.
Indeed. I think you're getting a lot of amens from the viewers. Bishop William Barber, Seth Harris, thank you both very much. Really appreciate it. Stay safe. And stick around, please. Senator Kamala Harris is live and coming up next.